Welcome to Burlesk Custom Guitars. Guitars have been my passion for my entire life. Handcrafted by my hands to be played by yours. Each one I create is like no other. My name is James. Come along with me on this musical journey. Deep dive. Happy Straturday, fellow babies. I get to delve into this delicious US Strat today. Little bit of burlesque sizing. Look at that oversized headstock. So sexy. Some people say there's no rest for the wicked. Well, if that's the case, color me the devil. Nothing wrong with being busy as far as I'm concerned. I remember my father used to say when I was a kid, stick a broomstick up my ass and I'll sweep the floor behind me. I know what he means now, but I'm not complaining. Hope you have a great weekend, folks. Sorry I haven't been online too much. I've been super busy, but I got a lot of projects coming down the pipeline for you to see, and you will be seeing it on Burlesk Guitars on YouTube and also on the videos I do for you. Do it for love, do it with passion, and all in the name of tone. Bye-bye for you. Fret edges are dressed, leveled, polished, etc. Got some very nasty pits out of there. And what you see is the remainder of the heavy metal work that was done. Now I'll clean it up and give you a view of it done. So here we have the neck now sucking up some vital juices into the fretboard that it required. Everything's cleaned up and dressed and leveled and yada yada yada. Just gotta clean that nut up a little bit before we put the strings on. I'm gonna go through basically a setup with you guys and what I do in a setup. So I've done the frets. That's the big part usually. Just a little word of advice to you. If your frets are pitted and divoted and all that stuff, you can set your guitar up 600 ways from Sunday. It's still not gonna play properly. It's still gonna hit sharps and flats, and it's still gonna buzz in spots and stuff like that. So if you've got frets that are in bad shape, I'm not trying to be rude, but you're only kidding yourself if you're trying to set up guitars. I actually have had clients that don't realize the importance of how frets are, you know, in the overall scheme of things. They're the first thing I look at when a client brings me a guitar. And they haven't even, in most cases, even thought of them. So first thing is frets with me. Then we move on to the next step, which is we're going to take a look at the body. I'm just going to move this neck out of the way. Try and keep you pinned on the bench as best as possible. And then what I like to do is do a full inspection of the electronics. Check everything out, make sure everything's good. Take a look at the pots and the caps and stuff, and as we can see on this, it's set up really well. It's got treble bleed circuits on it, and some tone leveling. It's got a couple of caps on there, a little bit different than the standard tone setup. So I'm probably just going to leave that, clean these pots up, clean up the switch, and everything looks good. I don't see any bad solder points. Oh, there's a hair from somebody at the Fender factory. 'Cause it sure ain't mine. Yeah, everything looks great. I always like to look at there's my finger. I always like to look at solders and stuff. Make sure you got all your contact points. If it's a really old guitar, like anything, you're going to want to resolder all these points, which I do a lot. In this case, we don't need to. All these solder points look good. I don't see any opens or anything like that. And what I mean by an open is when, if you see on one of these lugs, if you see a space in there, you want to make sure that it's filled with solder. You don't want to have spaces, because then what happens if it moves, or the wire moves, it'll just break off and be sitting there floating and cause static and stuff. So yeah, we're going to give these a little blast with some contact cleaner. I use Electrosolve contact cleaner. It's pretty expensive, but it does a great job. I've tried a few other ones, and this is the best. It doesn't leave any residue, and it dries nice and quick. So when you're cleaning a pot, you want to spray into that slot there, not on the top. A lot of people spray on the top. You spray into the slot, and then you work the pot back and forth as you're doing it. And then the switch, if you look back here, those are the contacts that are moving. When you see the switch move, let me see if I can move this for you. See if you can see that. See how those are moving? In the middle is the contact. So you want to make sure that all those contacts are clean as well. So the contact cleaner will work as well on there. And in some cases, if the switch gets too corroded or pitted, they pit over time, and the contacts will just be done. So you have to replace the switch. Pots as well, they wear with time and the crazy stuff we do when we're playing. You know, the bumps and the bangs and stuff. See a lot of busted pots in my day, that's for sure. So I'm just going to clean these up, and then I'm going to throw this cover back on. Everything else looks good, and we'll test the circuit. So now we're going to test the circuit. And you're saying, hey James, how do you do that without strings? Very simply. With a little metallic object. Basically anything that's metallic, that doesn't have too much aluminum in it, will make these pickups sound. You can actually test each individual lug of your pickup, if you're worried and concerned about that. You can test your switches, make sure everything's working fine. So I'm on bridge, pardon me, position 4, that's working, middle position, all my posts are working, position 2, all my posts are working, position 1. Now let's test our tone controls. You can just, by listening, same thing. Go to center. Oh. We're on the back, tone control now, checking the bridge. Let me just check this. Okay, so the back one works for bridge and middle, and then the front one works for neck. That's the way this guitar is wired up, which is very cool. So yeah. Quick way to test your circuit. Another thing I want to tell you too, I forgot to tell you about before. When you're cleaning your pots, when you're giving these a clean, you don't want to clean them too much. You just want to give them a little blast. If you are constantly, what happens if you clean them too much is you take all of the, there's a kind of I think it's called lithium grease inside there, but it's non-conductive. And basically you take all that lithium grease out of there, and then you've got metal on metal, or brass on brass, and that wears it even faster. So when you're cleaning these, make sure you use a good contact cleaner. Do not use automotive contact cleaner. Big no-no. It's nowhere near as good. You might go, hey dude, it's way cheaper. Don't out cheap yourself with that stuff. Buy a smaller bottle if that's the case. But automotive contact cleaner is completely different than electrical contact cleaner. So, be warned. Another hair from Fender. It ain't mine! Anyway, let's throw this cover back on because we know that's good. And all our controls are feeling good. What I like to do with pots too is lift them up and down. You don't want to have any movement up and down in your pot because that means that the post is possibly coming loose as well. And a lot of the times that's from removing caps and stuff, like, or pardon me, the knobs. A lot of guys will try pulling the knobs off and rip the post right out of the volume pot, and that happens a lot, especially with old guitars. I've actually got a special tool just to remove volume pots, knobs, and tone pot knobs. This is just so it takes it off nice and evenly and lifts it up. But in some cases, it'll rip the thing right apart because it's old and it's corroded. So that's one of the few reasons you're going to change your volume pots. So that's something to look for. Switch again. We want to listen for any contact problems or any pickups that are not working or intermittency. And if that's the case, again, you can clean it. Don't over clean it. And then if it's not working, we want to replace. So we're going to put the guitar back together, put some strings on it, and then set her up. I'm doing some Van Halen. Paul Gilbert, actually, if you really want to know, was the first guy that I saw do that. He had a bunch of picks on the end of his drill bit too, and he used it on the guitar. It sounded really cool. As well as the electromagnetic occurrence that is going on. And there's kind of a thing, but let's talk about that. This is electromagnetics occurrence. Basically, because these are magnets, and there's brushes in here, and there's a motor winding inside of here, it's creating a frequency. Pretty cool, eh? One thing I wanted to mention too, that I did see in this guitar, that I'm not a fan of, is paper shims in the neck. We do not use paper shims here at Burlesk. We use either one of two kinds of shims. We use proper wood shims that are designed and cut specifically for some guitars, or we use brass shims. And the reason being is you want resonation, right? You want the guitar to resonate and sustain, and the best materials they've found to do that are brass and wood. Obviously, that's why they make guitars out of wood. So if you're going to shim something, you want to use something that's going to basically, it's going to make that contact nice between the neck and the body, and it will vibrate through as opposed to just dead stop. Now, you say paper's made from wood, James. Yes, you're correct, but paper is not like wood. It's not porous. It's mashed and it's processed and it's pulped and it's turned into a mush, and then they turn it into paper. Wood is open and porous. Brass has natural sustain because of its density and the fact that it has, you can hear it when you tap it and such. That's why they use it for nuts, they use it for bridges, they use it for saddles, they use it for big blocks on Floyd Roses, my personal fave, and I use it for shims. And on this guitar, I'm going to put, there's 3 different sizes I have here. I think I'm going to put a number 2 on this because it was fairly chunky, the shim that was on here, and I'm looking in this pocket, and it's created a bit of a divot in the wood. So it kind of wasn't really shimming anything. It was just got pressed in there and flattened right into the wood. So we're going to put this in, and then we're going to set our guitar up. You can tell this neck's never been off this guitar. because there's still wax on the screws here. They put wax on the screws. Sorry, I hope you can see that. When they're setting the necks on at Fender. But that's all coming off because that's just going to get in our way now. I like to take the necks off when I'm working on them because there's a few reasons. Less chance of damaging the guitar or marking it up. And it's just a lot easier to do, and you can get right in there and let me put you back in proper view. You can get right in there and get into all the good spots without having to work around the body and such. And you can see more. That's the thing. If you can see better, you're always going to do a better job, in my humble opinion. That's why some of us need to wear glasses. I don't have to wear them doing this. I do have to wear them when I'm driving. Just a little bit about myself, just so you know. Sharing myself with you. So yeah. I really, this neck was super dry. So as you can see, I've treated it 3 times with the Burlesk Fretboard Love, a special formulation. I'll talk about that some other time. A special formulation that we had made up here in Calgary, but yeah, that's another story. And it does a great job, as you can see. But this thing soaked in quite a bit of it, and it was certainly needing that, which is why the frets and the edges were sticking out like crazy. So now we're going to set this neck back in with its nice shim. And you know what? That's going to be just Jim dandy. So, our shim is doing exactly what I want to see on this neck, because it was, if you look at a lot of Fender guitars, especially ones that are less hands-on nowadays because everything's done with CNC, some of the pockets are actually, I've noticed it a lot, are actually slightly angled inside. And I've also noticed a couple of the necks are angled on the back plate. Slightly larger on the heel as they are at the beginning, which is all CNC stuff. Whether they've done it in research and development or whether it's just changing the design, I don't know, because they don't let us people know these things. I'm not sure why they did it. But there's obviously a reason. I didn't notice, I'm just trying to remember if they had that tilt mechanism in the guitar. I saw that. Yes, it did have the tilt adjustment on the back of the neck. This one does not. Some of them have a drilled hole here, and you can move the neck back and forth inside the pocket and set it up where you want it. That's why I put a shim in here. Boy, this thing's got some more wounds, this beast. It's a nice guitar. It's got a good weight to it. I love the headstock. Oh, I lost you. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, the headstock's very cool. I like the oversized headstock. Some guys don't, but whatever, man. Whatever, man. So yeah. It's nice. It's right where I want it to be, where I can see it. There's a special little trick I have to know where I want it. I'm going to clean this bridge up because it's got some goobaciousness to it. Toothbrushes are wonderful things in a guitar shop. Do not worry. This is not one that I used. I buy my toothbrushes specifically for my work. This is a cool shirt one of my clients, Lawrence, brought back from I believe Hawaii. Larry's Music Shop. Kauai, Hawaii. He brings me t-shirts whenever he goes traveling. It's very cool. It's very gentlemanly of him. He's a good client. You will be seeing some of his work coming up pretty soon on the show. So, next is to put some strings on, and then we're going to set it up. I'm going to clean that nut first with my special sanding tools. Specifically developed for woodworking. This is kind of a cool little thing. If you can get yourself some of this, you know, one roll would last someone a lifetime, I'm sure. I go through about 2 a year. But this is called Mitchell's Abrasive Cord. And it's a very thin, basically a sandpaper cord. What size is this? So you can get them from 0.31 millimeters to 3.8 millimeters. I believe this is a number 54, which is about, if I recall correctly, it's about a half a mil. So it's got a nice abrasive on it. So for cleaning nuts, it's great. And nuts get dirty, as we all know. But when that happens, and if you do not clean your nut, which you should be, you filthy swine, it binds up, and your strings will start binding in there. It creates a goop. All of the nickel and silver, or whatever your strings are made up of, literally starts building up inside of here. And it makes it dirty and missized and makes things bind. So this stuff is magic for cleaning it out. And I'm not pushing down while I'm doing this. I'm just going side to side and lightly going across the top because I don't want to change the slot. Obviously, I don't want to make the slot deeper or anything with this. You could if you wanted to, if you did it long enough. But you just want to clean it up and get all that crap out of there. Because schmutzin is no goodsin. I hate dirty guitars. Unless they're relict guitars. Even relict guitars don't have to be dirty. I mean, that's some of the ones I see that people are saying. I'm just like, ugh. Bleh. Not for me, baby. So let's have a look at my nut. Where am I going here? Jesus. Wow. Terrible. Terrible cameramanship. That way. There it is. So those slots are nice and cleaned out now. That is acceptable. It is the way. Put you back over here. I'm sure Lori will edit out all of this crap, so I'm hoping she will anyway. So now, I haven't heard from the client what strings he wants on, so we're going to have to wait. Okay, so it's 10s. Another thing to do, another thing we do, I do, you should do as well, is a top-to-toe tighten of your guitar. I call it the top-to-toe tighten. You would be amazed how many times I get clients bring me a guitar in that are having tuning stability issues, and the first thing I notice is all of their tuners or machine heads are loose. Well, there's your problem, dude. So I always make sure everything is nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten things. You want to just make sure they're snug, and do this a lot, like do it all the time. Back and front, if there's screws in the back, make sure they're snug. Don't crank them because you'll strip them. They're really strip easy. The tuning machine heads, make sure they're snug and tight. Make sure your nut is also glued in, because a lot of them aren't. I've got clients where the nut's like sliding around. I'm like, you're doing a bend, your nut could move. It's possible. Also, your bridge. A couple things. Always make sure on a telly, always tighten everything up. Your screws on a Strat, your six screws on the Strat bridge should be flush to the top. If you look at the front of the bridge on a Strat, it's got a slight angle on it so that it can do the tippity, the whammy dammy, and the dive bombs. But basically what you want to do, unless you've got this thing floating, and there's a difference between the two. If you've got the bridge floating, you're going to get more of a treble-y sound, more of a quacky kind of Strat-y vintage type tone. If you've got the bridge resting on the body, you're going to get way more sustain, and you're going to get a lot more bottom end out of your guitar. So most guys, 99.9% of the people that I set up their guitars, they want more sustain and more bottom end out of their Stratocaster. So back to this. The screws, the 6 screws, you want them to be not pushing it up. You don't want them to be loose, but you want them to be level and just touching the top of the metal. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because over time, from playing, everything loosens up. It's vibrating. This thing is going like crazy. Spaces too. I mean, goodness. Everything loosens up because of it. Because of the vibrations. So, you want to check everything. Even your strap pins, for God's sake. On the back, you want to check, make sure everything in here is good, nice and set up and tight where you want it. You don't want to over tighten things. Your neck, I always go, even when you saw that I used my drill with a chuck on it, but I always go in, make sure it's nice and tight. Another thing too is on some guitars, if the neck pocket is not cut, it's a little overcut, you can get some shims and put them in on one end and one here. I like to use, I'll save, let me see if I got any here. I'll just take like clear packaging from Stuff. Where have I got some? I'm sure I got some around here. Oh, James, come on. Ah, I know I got some around here, but anyway, I'll just show you. Like something like this, I would take this package here and use some of this clear. I would cut this because this stuff's, you know, it's about a 1/2 millimeter thick, and it's clear. It's not, you're not going to see it, and you can cut it into the strips that'll fit on either side of the neck and fit your neck in that way. It's just a good little tip because you don't want your neck moving at all. If you're, I mean, even if you think about it, you move or you jump on stage and you're holding on to your guitar, if your neck's got any movement in it, chances are your neck just moved on you, and you're probably a little flat, either on your low strings or your high strings. So that's another little trick I like to use. You can use cardboard and stuff. I mean, obviously, ideally, the best thing to use would be wood, but it's not really a contact point for sustain or tone. It's more like we're using it to keep it stiff and solid in there. So, you know, I mean, using materials like brass and wood on the sides, if you can do it, that's great. But getting a piece of wood cut that thin to fit in there that's evenly cut, it's pretty darn hard. So that's why I recommend using that nice thin clear plastic, because of the fact if it's a bigger space, you can double it up, or, you know, you got to think about it this way. If you put one over here and one over here, now you're up to about 0.75 millimeter, okay? So if you put another one over here and another one over here, now you're up to about, you know, 2.5 mils. So that's how you got to think about things. And you don't want to force necks into a pocket either, because that's when you'll get cracking and stuff like that. So a neck needs to be snug, almost like a vacuum fit when you put it in. It should be shoomp, feel nice and snug, and no movement if possible. A lot of older guitars, you can't avoid it, and with a lot of CNC guitars, I mean, you shouldn't see it, but I do see it in a lot of the new CNC guitars too, neck discrepancies and stuff like that. It's just the nature of the beast. Control and quality control. So, I digressed, but back to the bridge. I'll try and show you this without messing things up too much. It's kind of hard, a hard thing to see. Ooh, listen to my phone. There we go. So you can see I don't have them, they're just flush with the metal. And that's basically the job. You don't want them to be tight, because if you tighten them, it's going to actually stop the movement of the trem. So they're just basically coming down. As soon as you feel it making contact, stop. You can visually see it as well. And they should all be of the same tightness. Tightness, is that a word? If not, it is now. So I'm going to string this thing up, and then I'm going to do my setup process, which is neck relief, action, intonation, and then I do my pickup heights and all that jazz. Now, the reason I'm not going to tell you all of that information is because there's many reasons why. So many people have asked me if I can show you how to do a setup on your guitar. Well, I kind of am right now, but okay, do you play slide? Do you play with a capo? Are you going to be playing metal? Do you want a higher action? Do you want a super low action? Do you want your guitar to sustain more? Do you want your chords to ring clearly? Or are you just going to shred? It all is a factor of the guitar. So saying, here's how to do a setup, I'm just hitting one note if I do that. I'm not hitting them all. So I'd rather, if you've got those kind of questions and stuff, send them to me and I can answer them the best I can. For example, I'll give you a reason, like for if you're playing slide or if you use a capo, the neck relief has to be different than you would if you didn't. The action has to be different. So these are all things that are imperative to knowing how the client wants their guitar set up. Most guys are pretty comfortable with not a super low action, but a fairly stable action. They want good intonation and they want it to be comfortable. Some guys use capo, some guys don't. If you use a slide, you're going to have your action slightly higher and you're going to have more relief in the neck because you don't want it to butt out and you don't want those notes to die when you're playing with a slide on. But yeah, there's many ways of setting up a guitar and it all depends on the player and what you're playing. So one general setup, I've seen hundreds of them on Facebook and on YouTube, and yeah, it's okay, that's a setup, but it's not your setup. So that's the factor here. I'm not showing you how to do just a setup because your setup could be different than Joe Schno's, right? I did say most people have no problem with my regular setup that I do for most people, and it's not a huge factor. It's just a basic setup, which, you know, anybody can find out the information on. But knowing the player, knowing what they want to do, and knowing what they want to do down the road, and asking the right questions too is imperative to doing the setup properly. So know that and know what you're going to be doing. Do some research and find out. A lot of people are like, hey man, my action's too high. But I'm like, hey dude, you asked me to set it up for slide. So it's got to be up there. If you want it to do properly, that's the way it should be. So this is things that people need to know, that they need to find out. I'm digressing, so I want you to delete all this shit. Go back a few minutes and delete all this crap. A fresh set of SIT Power Wound strings. These are wicked strings, by the way. Made in the USA. Yeah, and they come with a bonus B and E string, which is another bonus. We like to give our clients bonuses because we love our clients. We truly do. Who's we? I have met and made a lot of really good relationships with some people. I don't say friends because friends is a totally different thing. Relationships and acquaintances are two things that are different. And friendships and relationships are different as well, I think. Anyway, again, I'm just talking for the sake of talking. Hopefully Lori's just gonna fast forward all this shit. You won't have to listen to me ranting like a moron. Voila! All done.